Welcome, welcome. This is the Enlightenment Show, and I'm your host, Laurie Schoenfeld. This is where Chicken Soup for the Soul meets the artist way with Nancy Drew. Our guest today is Meryl Ain, author of Shadows We Carry. We're going to be chatting with her today all about her book and something that she has captured within her own family. Welcome, Meryl. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you so much for having me, Lori. And I have to say, Nancy Drew was my absolute favorite as a child. And I love the Chicken Soup books. They're just so inspirational. Love them. So perfect.
Meryl, you've captured my heart because those are two things I grew up with: Chicken Soup for the Soul and Nancy Drew. It is officially summertime. What are some fun things you like to do in the sun?
Well, we like to go to the beach. We live on Long Island, walk on the boardwalk, especially. Look at the beautiful flowers and greenery, and get together with family, barbecue, all that good stuff.
Hmm. What are some favorite things that you like to eat at barbecues, Meryl?
Oh, that's a toughie, especially because I gave up red meat a couple of years ago. My husband had a kidney transplant a little over a year ago. And up until that time, he was on a special diet. And we were trying hard to, slow down the disease. We did it for a while. It didn't really help that much. So I gave up red meat in solidarity. And also I thought, what did I need to eat it for? So what do I like to eat? Chicken, fish, vegetables, no longer hot dogs and hamburgers.
It's like grilled chicken. So what are they called? The skush kebabs or the little
Shish kebab.
skewers?
Yeah, shish kebab is good on the skewer with vegetables. That is a good thing. Or you can have vegetable kebabs. You can have chicken patty, turkey patty. If you put enough stuff on it, you really don't even miss the taste of beef, I guess.
You've got me set for a barbecue, Meryl. I'm ready to go grill after the show.
Okay.
Can you share with our listeners and viewers what Shadows We Carry is all about?
Okay, well, thank you. So, Shadows We Carry was published on April 25th, and it is actually the sequel to my debut novel, The Takeaway Men. However, you do not have to read The Takeaway Men first. Shadows We Carry can also be read as a standalone. I give a whole list of returning characters and new characters at the beginning of the book. So it's the continuation of the story of the twins, Branka and Jojo Lubinsky, who are children of parents who survived the Holocaust. They have an interesting backstory, which is revealed at the end of The Takeaway Men. They're brought to New York as toddlers. So Shadows We Carry begins when they're in high school in the late 1960s, which for students of history or those who've lived it, it was a very tumultuous time in our nation's history. You had the war in Vietnam, the civil rights movement, and the women's liberation movement just starting, and there was a lot of distrust of government. There were protests in the street. It was just a very difficult time. So these twins who have carried this cloud of the Holocaust with them, because they are children of survivors of the Holocaust, now bring that whole way of thinking to all these other issues. So they're confronted with the difficulties of these times. So right at the beginning of the book, Jojo has an accidental pregnancy in the years before abortion was the law of the land, which of course it isn't anymore, but it was for 50 years, and she has to deal with that. And Branca wants to carve out a career for herself as a journalist, but there's still a tremendous amount of discrimination against women, and they're still very interested in their genealogy. Their mother actually was a righteous Gentile, a Catholic, who saved their father during the war. The father is Jewish. They deal with this, and they interact with a couple of other characters who are also looking into their genealogy. So there's the son of a former Nazi who finds out that his father was a guard at Auschwitz, herding Jews into the gas chambers, where all he has known for 20 some odd years is this loving father. So he has to deal with that. And then there's a Catholic priest who loves the church, loves being a priest, but finds out on his adopted mother's deathbed that his biological parents were Jews who gave uh, him away as an infant to this Christian family for safekeeping, and they perished. So he was raised that way. So these are the issues that percolate throughout the book.
Mhm. I loved, Meryl, how you had put, because I didn't read The Takeaway Men, but I did read this book. And I felt with how you put the names and the characters out before the story that I could go back and really get to know the characters as if I hadn't missed a beat. So I really appreciated how you put that within the novel so that there wasn't that feeling of missing something from the first book, that I could still figure out the story for The
Thank
Shadows
you.
We Carry. You did a fantastic job with that.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
You had multiple themes throughout the book, as you had mentioned just right now. What was the one that you discovered first?
The one that I discovered first. Uh, I guess the first one was, the question of bloodlines, and are we our own people, or do we, carry the baggage, the influence, if it is so, the sins of our
Mm,
parents, and that was a running theme. I would say that was the first thing, but the other, really, hand in hand with that, was I wanted to show what it was like for women back in those times, because I think younger women don't don't necessarily know that, and although it feels like we don't still have full equality in some sense, they don't necessarily know about what the struggles were, how difficult it was for women back in the day, and I wanted to tell that story, and also just the story of the political and cultural turmoil. My grandmother always said, the pendulum swings and history repeats itself, and we're in this very difficult time now, but we've been there before.
hmm I love how you play with the concept of bloodlines, as just looking from my own perspective. There's scenes as a younger kid and a teen that I thought I understood about my mother and my grandmother. And the older that I get, the more I'm unraveling pieces that I had no idea, but it's starting to make more sense on why they behaved and reacted in the ways that they did that I could not understand as, a 20-year-old or a teenager, 30-year-old. Have you noticed parts within your own life where, as you're going through your own journey, that you're finding pieces of understanding within your own bloodline with the women in your life?
Absolutely, absolutely. So my grandmother she was a very intelligent woman. She was one of 12 children, brought up in poverty on the Lower East Side of New York, and she had aspirations. She wanted to be a nurse, which, at that time was really amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And she actually applied to Mount Sinai Nursing School, and she was accepted. And I have the letter that I inherited from my mom, which says you're accepted, and it gives a list of what she has to bring the first day. But her mother would not let her go. She just would not let her go. And my grandmother later, my with my grandfather. They had a drugstore, and she was a businesswoman and everything. But I feel sad. She wanted to be a nurse, and similarly, my own mother was. In the army. She joined the WAC in World War II, and she worked on the newspaper, and she was a reporter, and she was amazing. And then, like most women after World War II, they were just came back and were expected to be housewives. She later did go to work and find a career for herself. But yeah, I mean, I always knew this story, but in looking through it through this lens, it does make me sad. Yeah.
What are three things that you loved most about the twins, Jojo and Bronca?
Well, the first thing was I loved that they were different, and I crafted them to be different because I'm not a child or a grandchild of Holocaust survivors. This is just something that I have cared deeply about for a very long time, and I have studied and researched it intensely. But what I learned from my friends who are children and grandchildren of Holocaust survivors is that that cloud hangs over all of them, but it does
Mhm.
so in different ways. So that's why I crafted them as twins, and that's what I love about that they're very different. Their reactions to their heritage is different, and their reactions to life is different as well. What else did I like about them? I love that Bronca was so intense, probably too intense. But she still, had the courage to follow her dream, even though she was crushed by various
Mm.
setbacks. And I also liked that JoJo was resilient, besides the fact that, she had this unplanned pregnancy. She dealt with it in the way that it was dealt with in those times, and she did go on and make a life for herself.
Mhm. Were you surprised at all, Meryl, about the direction that your book took?
Yeah. you know they say that the characters lead you, and I always thought that that was kind of a cliche. Uh, but it really isn't. It really, really isn't. And I guess the surprise, I had no idea. I knew that I wanted to have this priest as a Catholic, as a character. You know, he you know, and he the fact that he had been born Jewish, but I really didn't know where that was going to go or where his relationship with Bronco was going to go. And I also didn't know where Brian and his relationship with his father, who was the former Nazi, nor where the former Nazi would end up. These all evolved as I was writing the book.
Mhm. What messages did you hope would be conveyed for the readers in your book?
Well, I wanted, first of all, to write about the impact of the Holocaust. I've read studies that many young people today don't know about it, don't
Mm.
know what happened. There are Holocaust deniers today. And, sometimes when you read about this in this form, as opposed to, a textbook, it could have more resonance. So I definitely wanted to put it out there for that reason. I also wanted to uh, raise the whole question of individual and collective responsibility. I, I mean, every day that goes by, we just finished watching A Small Light on Netflix, which is the story of Meep Geese, who hid Anne Frank and her family for 2 years, and she and her husband were such righteous people who just rose to the occasion, but most were not. So I wanted to raise that question, who's responsible, and what is our individual responsibility, and can this happen again, and is there a way to prevent it from happening again?
Mhm. I love the conversation piece as you bring in, these themes with throughout your book. It also opens up the conversation, no matter what age you are, of talking about, history of what has happened, but also where we are now and where we were in the 70s and how we can be that change and integrate new things with those layers. How do you feel, Meryl, when you have a book club? What are some of those conversations that you hope younger generations can start really engaging and talking about?
Well, in terms of the Holocaust, or women, or both.
Either all.
Okay, in terms of the Holocaust, I mean, it's such a big, it's such a huge issue, and the fact that we are still today experiencing anti-Semitism and racism and prejudice against immigrants, basically against people who are different. So as a former teacher, I think it's important um, to convey to young people that we're all one human family. We all have feelings that are similar, and we need to get along, otherwise we're going to destroy the world. And it's young people have to understand that Germany was the most civilized and the most cultured country in the world at, at the time, and yet Hitler was elected, and this plan was unleashed in increments, and not just the people in Europe, but we in the United States and throughout the world bear responsibility. We let it happen. So just the whole question of what is our individual responsibility, to society, to the world, to each other, and we just need to treat each other with kindness and with understanding. And as far as women's rights, women fought very hard for the rights we have, but it's very gratifying. Back in the day, as I write in the book, it was very difficult. There was a quota for women in professional schools. I mean, now I think more than 50% of the students in medical school and law school are women. So we have come a long way, but I think what we've learned recently is that we have to be ever vigilant and continue to stand up for our rights.
Mhm. You have your own podcast called People of the Book. Tell us about that.
Well, I would say one of my dreams was always I always wanted to be a talk show host. And I mean, I never did anything about it. It was just sort of a secret dream of mine. So when my first book, The Takeaway Men, came out, it was during the height of the pandemic, and just about everything was virtual. And as a result, I really developed a whole network of authors who were very supportive and readers, mainly on Facebook. And I started a Facebook group called Jews Love to Read, and the podcast just sort of evolved. So I interview authors and others connected with the book community, and I love it.
Hmm. Isn't it cool that I'm so grateful we had that outlet during the pandemic, that we
Yes.
have virtual for that connection and still having the opportunity to connect to people and their stories and books.
It's amazing, and I have friends that I've never met in person, and it's amazing.
I am loving, Meryl, that you wanted to be a talk show host, because so did I. I remember,
Well,
like,
you are, right?
yes, this is my version of it, of sitting on my bed with a pretend mic, speaking to my stuffed animals, pretending I was like Oprah Winfrey's backup talk show host. Why did you want to be a talk show host? What excited you about that?
I just like talking, and I like talking with people, and I like exploring ideas. And it just seemed to me that you could have really great conversations. I mean, I have great conversations with people, not as a talk show host, but when I was a kid and I would watch these talk shows, I mean, they just had these amazing conversations. Yeah.
I'm feeling you, Meryl.
Why
Nancy
why did
Drew.
you why did you want to be a talk show host?
Oh man, I love, same thing. I love talking, and I find people so fascinating. Like, I wanted to have those conversations where it wasn't small talk. It was having those in-depth conversations of getting to know why people are the way that they are and how they see the world, and trying to see through their lenses. That just has always been something that excites and fascinates me, and will be there till the end. What are a few shadows that you've carried, Meryl?
Ooh,
Hmm.
wow. Well, I wanted to be a lot of things. But I did grow up in a time where there was less fewer opportunities for women. I toyed with the idea of going to law school, and I remember that I went to speak to my advisor in college, and I guess he said, "Yeah, sure, you can go to law school. You'd make an attractive lawyer, but why don't you become a teacher?" And you, I mean, he obviously had no clue who I was. He said, "You can go teach in Europe for 2 years, and you can get a little red sports car, and you can drive around Europe." And yeah, you can apply to law school if you want to, but you really should consider teaching. And I catapulted, and I did. So I would say
Mm.
that's one thing. And, I'm enjoying, being a novelist so much, I say, why didn't I try this earlier, But I didn't have the confidence, I didn't have the time. I just didn't. I mean, I say that to myself all the time. Why didn't I do this before? But I truly thought that it was something I could not do. And it wasn't until I joined a book club and I started reading many novels that I began to wonder if I could do it. And then I read books about it, and I took some classes, and then I was ready to take a stab at it.
Mhm. I love how you bring in feeling confident enough to plunge in. Um, that there is always that piece of trusting in your voice and starting to learn who you are before you feel ready to tackle the big dream. Like you've got to learn how to trust yourself and lean into that first.
Right.
Hmm. What is a choice that you've made that's impacted your family?
Well, I think that this is the choice. I think that I have had several careers. I've been a teacher. I've been a school administrator. I worked as a journalist. I worked in public relations, and I've been an essayist for a long time. But like I said, I didn't think I could write a novel, and I think the fact that I've gone for it and done it, and people are reading it and liking it. I I think that what this has done for my family is to show resilience, but also reinvention, that we are constantly able and should reinvent ourselves. And I think that, kids who are, just maybe graduating from high school now and going to college, I mean, they're going to have something like 4 to 6 careers in their lifetime. So they probably know this already, but I didn't know it. And I hope that my children are flexible and resilient as a result of what I did, hopefully.
Well, you're definitely leading the steps of moving forward and reinventing yourself and taking those brave steps.
Thank you.
Congratulations, Meryl, on your second book here and more to come.
Thank you.
We're going to turn it to the inner child questions segment. Are you ready, Meryl? First question: what is a tradition that your family started that you are now passing down to your own children?
Wow. Well, wow. I mean, I'd have to say, we are a family of writers. My brother said at my father's funeral uh, that writing um, in our family is a competitive sport, and um, I remember when I was in kindergarten, my mother was sitting at the typewriter, um, writing writing her book, which was her story of World War II, and she wrote it. She didn't know how to get a book published. She sent it to different publishers. They rejected it. I mean, now they would love it. And then later, when she was 80, she wrote a memoir, which was just for the family. So I remember when I was in kindergarten and my mother was at the typewriter, and I had this idea of, the book would be finished and published and it would have a red leather cover, and I would bring a copy to my kindergarten teacher. And that was, and so I wrote my first poem in the third grade. It was published in the school newspaper. I have been writing always, and my kids all write, and my daughter-in-law is two of my daughters-in-law. One is a poet, and one is an author. So we I think it's important.
Mhm. I love the visual of the red binding
Yeah.
when you give it to the kindergarten teacher. That's beautiful. As a teen, what did your bedroom look like?
Boy. It was pink. There was a bulletin board there with my idols, including the Beatles, next to our late president, John F. Kennedy. Pictures of Jackie Kennedy, and that was both. That. What else? I had a vanity. One of my mother's friends had some. I don't know. It was an old piece of furniture. I think my father painted it white, and they put a white ruffled skirt around it, and it had the mirror on it. And yeah, that's what my room looked like.
I am seeing that because you bring that in a little bit in the book with the pink room, and you got the Beatles and
Yeah.
JFK. Yes. Third question. What is the oddest food combo that you've liked and tried, or you've just tried?
Ugh, I've heard you ask that to other people, and I said, I hope she doesn't ask me this question. I don't know. My husband, all I could think of, and I know many people will not, but my husband thinks it's so odd that I put ketchup on an omelet. My, yeah,
Mm. Hmm.
I mean that I can't really think of anything.
Ketchup on an omelet can be definitely an interesting combo, Meryl.
Okay, good. Thank you.
You're
Because
you're you're set. That was good. Before we end today, can you share with our listeners and viewers what living a creatively abundant life means to you?
it means to me to be immersed in ideas always, uh, writing about ideas, f- reading great books, reading great literature, but also just being involved in current events and in the affairs of the day, having great conversations with people about them, listening to lectures, listening to others have great conversations. about them and thinking about them and pondering and having them raise questions for you and maybe writing something in response to those ideas.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Meryl. It has been an absolute pleasure to be with
Thank
you.
you. Thank you so much, Lori.
Absolutely. And where can our listeners and viewers find you if they have any questions for you after the show or would like to find your book?
Okay, well, I think that the best place is my website, merylain.com. That's my name, MERYLAIN. .com. There you'll find all the information about my books, which are, all on Amazon and Barnes and Noble and elsewhere. You'll find information about my podcast, People of the Book, my Facebook group, Jews Love to Read. And I think that is probably the best place to find me.
And we'll put those all down in the links for easy access as well. Thank
Thank
you for
you.
those who have joined us live today and will be watching on the replay. Remember, as you go about the rest of your week, to find the things that are working for you. You are the creator of your own story. What steps will you take next? We'll see you right here next Monday at 12 o'clock p.m. Mountain Standard Time. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Meryl.
Thank you. Thank you.